Most people believe money is the starting point of wealth. They assume that if they had more income, more capital, or better opportunities, everything else would fall into place. But that belief is backwards. Money is not the beginning of wealth. It is the result. Before wealth ever shows up in a bank account, it shows up in a pattern of thinking. This is one of the most misunderstood ideas in personal finance. People hear it and immediately reduce it to motivation or positive thinking. That is not what this lesson is about. This is not about optimism. It is not about wishing. It is about direction. Thoughts matter because thoughts determine decisions. Decisions repeated over time become habits. Habits compound into outcomes. Wealth is simply one of those outcomes. Most people never consciously choose their financial direction. They drift. They react. They respond to circumstances instead of designing a path. And drifting produces predictable results. Not because the person is incapable, but because direction was never established. Every sustained result in life begins with a sustained way of thinking. Businesses don't grow by accident. Careers don't advance randomly. Wealth does not appear spontaneously. Each is preceded by a long series of decisions guided by a dominant mental direction. This is why two people with similar income, intelligence, and opportunity can end up in completely different financial positions. The difference is not luck. It is not talent. It is not even effort. It is direction. Uncontrolled thinking leads to uncontrolled outcomes. If your thoughts are scattered, reactive, and inconsistent, your results will be the same. Financial drift always begins as mental drift. Most people work hard. Many are disciplined. Some are even patient. Yet they never become wealthy. The reason is not a lack of effort. It is effort applied without a clear direction. Effort without direction compounds nothing. When thought lacks focus, action lacks purpose. When action lacks purpose, results lack consistency. And without consistency, nothing compounds. This is why wealth does not begin with money. It begins with a clear mental framework. A person who has not defined what they are building will never recognize whether their decisions are helping or hurting them. Thoughts become powerful not because they are positive, but because they are persistent. A passing idea does nothing. A repeated line of thinking shapes behavior quietly over time. People underestimate how much their internal dialogue determines their external life, what they consider normal spending, what they consider reasonable risk, what they tolerate in debt, what they accept as just how things are. All of these are guided by thought patterns that have gone unexamined. Wealth requires intentional thinking because wealth itself is the result of intentional accumulation. No one accidentally saves consistently. No one accidentally invests patiently for decades. No one accidentally avoids destructive decisions year after year. Those outcomes are preceded by a disciplined mental posture. One of the most damaging financial habits is passive thinking, accepting assumptions without examination, believing narratives without questioning them, adopting goals that were never consciously chosen. When someone believes money is scarce, they behave differently than someone who believes money is a tool. When someone believes wealth is reserved for others, they make decisions that confirm that belief, not consciously, but consistently. This is how thought becomes reality, not through magic, but through repetition. People often misunderstand this because the process is invisible. You don't see the thousands of small decisions that shape a financial life. You only see the outcome years later. By then, the cause has been forgotten. A person who never planned to build wealth will make reasonable short-term decisions that quietly prevent long-term accumulation. Each decision feels harmless. Each choice feels justified. But together, they form a pattern. Patterns are powerful, and patterns begin in thought. This is why clarity matters so much. A clear mental aim does not guarantee success, but a lack of one guarantees drift. When you know what you are building, decisions become easier. Trade-offs become visible. Opportunity cost becomes real. Without clarity, everything competes for attention. Money is spent without intention. Time is allocated without strategy. Effort is scattered. Nothing compounds. Wealth is built when thinking becomes deliberate, when goals are defined, when decisions are evaluated based on whether they move you closer or farther from that direction. This does not require intelligence. It requires honesty. Honest evaluation of where you are. Honest assessment of what you want. Honest discipline to align behavior with that direction. Most people avoid this work because it is uncomfortable. It forces responsibility. It removes excuses. It makes outcomes traceable back to choices. But that is exactly why it works. Once thought becomes directed, behavior begins to align. Spending becomes intentional. Saving becomes purposeful. Investing becomes structured. Consistency becomes possible. And once consistency exists, compounding can finally operate. Money does not compound for people who drift. It compounds for people who stay aligned long enough for time to matter. This is why wealth often appears sudden to outsiders. They see the result, not the decades of quiet alignment that preceded it. They see the accumulation, not the discipline of thought that made it possible. People who build wealth think differently long before they live differently. Their decisions look boring. Their progress looks slow. Their patience looks excessive. Until it doesn't. Thoughts make you rich not because thoughts are powerful on their own, but because they guide behavior relentlessly over time. Money is only the scoreboard. If you want to change financial outcomes, you don't start by chasing money. You start by examining the thinking that produces your current results. You look for drift. You look for inconsistency. You look for habits that don't align with where you claim you want to go. Wealth is not built by motivation. Motivation fades. Wealth is built by structure. Structure survives boredom, discomfort, and time. Directed thought creates structure. Structure creates consistency. Consistency creates compounding. And compounding creates wealth. That is the real power of thought. Not fantasy. Not optimism. But disciplined direction applied long enough for results to become inevitable. Most people assume that once they understand this idea, they're done. They think recognizing that thoughts shape outcomes is enough. It isn't. Awareness without control changes nothing. The real problem is that most people do not govern their thoughts. They consume them. They absorb whatever is loudest, most repeated, or most emotionally charged. News cycles, social pressure, financial fear, envy, and comparison quietly dictate their thinking. And whatever dominates thought eventually dominates behavior. This is why wealth is so rare even among capable people. Their thinking is constantly being interrupted. One day they plan, the next day they react. One moment they are disciplined, the next they are distracted. Compounding requires continuity, and continuity cannot exist when thought is constantly reset. Directed thinking is not a one-time decision. It is maintenance. Just like capital, thinking must be protected from erosion. The world does not reward clarity. It rewards impulse. Every system around you is designed to pull your attention away from long-term outcomes and toward short-term stimulation. That is not accidental. A person who thinks long-term is harder to sell to, harder to manipulate, and harder to distract. Long-term thinkers are dangerous to systems that rely on impulsive consumption. This is why most financial mistakes are not mathematical errors. They are emotional ones. People know what they should do. They fail to do it because their thinking is overridden in the moment. Fear during downturns, euphoria during booms, social pressure during spending decisions, all of it traces back to ungoverned thought. Wealth requires emotional neutrality, not indifference, but control. The ability to think clearly when others are reactive. The ability to remain consistent when others are distracted. This is not intelligence. It is discipline of thought. The person who becomes wealthy is not the one who has the best ideas. It is the one who refuses to abandon good ideas under pressure. Most people interrupt their own progress. They change strategies too quickly. They abandon plans at the first sign of discomfort. They confuse motion with progress. This is where time becomes the ultimate filter. Time exposes thinking errors. It punishes inconsistency and rewards alignment. People who drift feel busy but go nowhere. People who think deliberately move slowly but arrive. Money does not reward urgency. It rewards endurance. And endurance begins mentally. If your thinking cannot tolerate boredom, delay, or temporary uncertainty, you will never hold a strategy long enough for it to work. You will always exit too early, change course too often, or chase what looks exciting instead of what is effective. This is why wealth feels unreachable to so many people. Not because it is complex, but because it requires a level of internal order that most never develop. Their thoughts run their actions instead of serving them. Thought discipline is the first form of capital preservation. Before you protect money, you must protect judgment. Once judgment is compromised, no amount of income can compensate. This is also why wealth is often built quietly. Loud thinking seeks validation. Quiet thinking seeks alignment. The former chases approval. The latter compounds. The paradox is that once thinking becomes stable, money becomes less emotional. Decisions feel calmer. Volatility feels manageable. Patience becomes natural. At that point, wealth is no longer something you chase. It is something you allow to unfold. Thoughts make you rich not because they attract money, but because they prevent you from sabotaging yourself long enough for wealth to accumulate. Money is not the beginning. It is the echo.